Chapter 1. The Mill on the Moor. The bus left them on the roadside like 3 parcels someone had forgotten to collect. Its red rear lights blurred into the fog as it rumbled away, swallowed by the rolling mist that spread endlessly over the moors. The air was raw and damp, the kind of cold that got inside your lungs and stayed there, clinging to your ribs. "Brilliant," Mark muttered, tugging his rucksack higher on his shoulder. "Middle of nowhere. I can't even see my own hand." "You should have worn gloves," Emily replied, her breath pale against the thick air. She pulled her coat tight around herself, her hood sticking slightly to the rain that hadn't stopped since they left York 2 hours ago. Reuben said nothing. He was the one who'd found the listing, an old stone cottage available cheap for 6 months, with a mill standing abandoned further down the valley. A project, the owner had said in his email. Something about keeping the place watched over. None of them had asked why it was so cheap. Cheap was good. Cheap was a good opportunity. The road beneath their boots was slick with moss and rainwater, leading into a lane that sloped downhill, vanishing into the fog. Above them, the outline of bare trees clawed the sky. Somewhere unseen, water moved, a sluggish stream, the hiss of it muffled, as though the fog itself was trying to hush them. Emily was the first to break the silence. "So, which way? Left looks like certain death. Right looks like less certain death." Reuben unfolded the paper map he'd printed. No signal out here. He liked it that way. The absence of phones, the silence. His eyes traced the faint lines. Downhill, past the stream. "We'll see the cottage before the mill." They began walking, their boots sinking in mud, the fog never thinning, only shifting like some living thing that resented being disturbed. The cottage appeared as if it had been waiting for them, hunched low at the base of a slope. Its stone walls were dark with lichen, the roof sagging under sodden tiles. The windows, small and square, reflected nothing of the world around them. Emily gave a low whistle. "Home sweet home. Cozy. It's atmospheric," Reuben said, though his voice lacked conviction. Mark kicked the door, half joking, half testing the structure. The wood creaked but didn't give. "If this falls in on us, I'm suing you, Rubes." The key turned reluctantly in the lock. The door opened to stale air, the musty scent of wood and damp stone. Inside, the rooms were bare except for a table, 3 mismatched chairs, and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been lit in years. The floor was uneven, flagstones slick with dust. Emily dropped her bag and laughed, the sound nervous, almost brittle. "This is ridiculous. We're living in a horror film set." Mark grinned, though his eyes darted around the shadows. "Don't say that. You'll jinx it." Reuben moved to the window. Through the fog, faintly visible, the outline of another building loomed further down the valley. Taller, wider, its roof broken in places, its walls swallowed by ivy. The mill. Something about it seemed to draw the mist tighter, as though it were breathing it in. He couldn't stop staring, until Emily touched his arm and startled him. "You all right?" she asked softly. He nodded, forcing himself to look away. "Yeah, just tired." That night, they lit a fire, drank cheap wine from enamel mugs, and tried to laugh off the weight of the place. The walls groaned with the wind. Water dripped somewhere in the ceiling, each drop falling with the slow precision of a clock. Mark sprawled on one chair, boots off, socks steaming by the hearth. "So tell me again," he said, "why is this mill abandoned? Seems like prime real estate." Reuben hesitated. He hadn't told them much. He wasn't sure how much he even knew. The listing said it was shut down in the 60s. Machinery too old, cost too high. The family that owned it moved to Leeds. "Then why leave it to rot?" Emily asked, hugging her knees on the floor. "Could have sold it. Knocked it down." Reuben swirled the wine in his mug. "Some places just don't get sold." Mark smirked. "That's cryptic as hell." Reuben didn't answer. He remembered the owner's email, a single sentence standing out. "You don't need to go near the mill. Just keep the cottage warm." The fire snapped loudly, startling them all. Fog pressed against the cottage windows as they slept, the mist so thick it seemed to seep through the cracks. The valley was silent except for the slow churn of the unseen stream. And somewhere beneath that silence, something else moved. They woke late, their breaths clouding in the unheated rooms. Rain had started again, harder now, lashing the windows. The valley outside was a gray void. Mark pulled on his boots, grinning at the storm. Perfect weather for exploring. Exploring what? Emily asked, though she knew the answer. The mill. Reuben stiffened. We don't need to. Oh, come on. Mark interrupted, already fastening his coat. We're here for 6 months. What else are we going to do? Play cards in the dark. Emily glanced at Reuben. It wouldn't hurt just to look. In daylight. Daylight, though, was a fragile thing here. The sky was a flat sheet of pewter, the fog never lifting. Still, curiosity outweighed caution. They set off down the slope, mud pulling at their boots, rain slicking their hair to their foreheads. The path wound along the stream, its water dark and restless, carrying leaves and broken branches. The mill grew larger with each step, its outline sharpening but never fully clear. It was enormous, 3 stories tall, its windows smashed, the stonework blackened by decades of weather. The water wheel sagged uselessly, half submerged in the stream, coated in moss. Up close, it smelled of rust and wet earth. Mark whistled. Now this is creepy. Imagine living next to this every night. Emily shivered. We are living next to this every night. Reuben said nothing. His eyes traced the windows, dark squares cut into the stone. The buildings seemed to lean toward them, looming, as though aware of their presence. They stood there for a long time, none of them daring to step closer. Finally, Mark broke the silence with a laugh that sounded too loud. All right, seen it. Sufficiently spooked. Let's head back before Rubes has a breakdown. Reuben tore his gaze from the mill, but not before he thought he saw something shift in one of the upper windows. Just fog, he told himself. Just fog. That night, the wind rose. It rattled the shutters, moaned down the chimney, scraped branches against the stone walls. The fire spat and hissed, fighting the draft. They tried to play cards, but the damp bent the deck, the numbers bleeding into smudges. Mark grew restless, pacing, muttering jokes that fell flat. Emily stared at the window, her face pale in the firelight. Do you hear that? She asked suddenly. They froze. At first there was only the storm. Then, faintly beneath it, a rhythm. A slow, uneven thump like wood striking water. Mark frowned. What the hell is that? Reuben's mouth was dry. He didn't want to say it, didn't want to give the thought shape, but he couldn't stop himself. The water wheel. The 3 of them sat in silence, listening to the sound echo from the valley. Thump, pause, thump, as if something had set the wheel turning again. Chapter 2, the sound beneath the fog. The sound carried all night. Not constant, but returning, always at the moment when one of them began to drift towards sleep. A dull, sodden thump, as though something impossibly heavy shifted in the valley. Then silence, so deep it roared in their ears. Emily sat upright in her blanket on the floor, her back against the hearth. She kept her eyes closed, pretending to rest, though her body was rigid, each noise slicing through her calm. Mark had tried to make a joke of it, muttering about the ghost of a hamster running the wheel, but even he had gone quiet after the 3rd or 4th thump. Reuben hadn't spoken at all. He lay on the narrow bed in the adjoining room, staring at the ceiling until dawn blurred the windows into a gray haze. His stomach clenched whenever the sound returned. It was familiar, horribly familiar, though he couldn't name why. When morning finally broke, it brought little relief. The fog was thicker, the valley reduced to a colorless blur. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was heavy, the kind that pressed close to your face and skin. Mark emerged from the cottage yawning, rubbing at his bloodshot eyes. Brilliant night. 10 out of 10. Best sleep of my life. He spat into the mud. That bloody wheel. It was moving, wasn't it? You both heard it. Emily tightened her coat, avoiding Reuben's gaze. It sounded like it, yeah. There's no water flow strong enough to turn it. I checked yesterday. Things clogged with moss and muck. Mark pointed down the slope. Something moved it. Reuben finally spoke, his voice low, or the wind caught it. Mark barked a laugh. Wind? Out here? That wasn't wind. They stood in silence for a while, staring through the fog toward the mill's hidden shape. The weight of it pressed on them, even when unseen. Breakfast was meager. Instant porridge, bitter coffee boiled over the fire. The taste of smoke clung to everything. Emily forced herself to eat while Mark shoved his food around the tin bowl, restless energy bristling off him. I say we check it out today. No, Reuben said immediately. Mark raised his brows. Oh, here we go. The prophet speaks. Emily glanced between them. Maybe we should, though, just to make sure it's safe. If the wheel's moving again, the whole structure might be unstable. Could collapse into the stream. Reuben's jaw tightened. The owner said we didn't need to go near it. Yeah, Mark said with a grin, and the owner's probably pissing himself laughing right now, thinking about the 3 idiots who actually moved into his cur shack. Emily set down her spoon. It's not about exploring. If the place is dangerous and it's that close, don't you want to know? Reuben had no argument for that, but dread filled his chest all the same. They left after breakfast, boots squelching through the mire. The fog shifted but never lifted a constant veil. Every tree they passed looked like a figure waiting. The mill loomed suddenly, its massive form emerging from the mist like a shipwreck on a sea of grass. The water wheel sagged beside it, half submerged, green with rot. And though it stood still now, Reuben swore he could still hear the echo of its turning. Mark approached first, whistling low. Look at this place. It's magnificent. Creepy as hell, but magnificent. The stone walls were blackened with damp, the windows gaping voids. Ivy and moss crawled up the mortar, but the structure held, stubborn and looming. The air smelled of rust, wet stone, and something fainter, a sweet, spoiled odor that turned Reuben's stomach. Emily stayed close to him. Her hand brushed his, not quite holding, not quite letting go. It looks hungry, doesn't it? Reuben didn't answer. Mark had already stepped up to the huge wooden doors at the front. They were chained, rust biting deep into the metal, but one hinge sagged as though it had been forced before. He rattled it and laughed when the whole frame shuddered. But we can get in easy. Want me to? No, Reuben snubbed. We're not going inside. Mark turned, smirking, fading when he saw Reuben's face. What's your problem, Rubes? Seriously, it's just an empty building. Then leave it empty. A silence hung between them, taut as wire. Emily broke it softly. Let's walk around. Just look. Nothing else. Reluctantly, Reuben agreed. They circled the mill. The stream ran hard against one side, churning dark water beneath the moss-choked wheel. The sound of it seemed louder here, echoing strangely, as though the mill itself swallowed and reshaped it. On the far side, they found a smaller annex, half collapsed. Its roof had caved in, timbers jutting out like broken ribs. Mark poked inside, sending birds scattering into the fog. Storage, maybe, or stables. Smells like rot. Emily kept her gaze fixed on the ground. There are bones here. They froze. Small, white, scattered across the mud. Too small to be cattle. Too many to be a chance. Mark crouched, frowning. Sheep, maybe? Foxes dragged him here. But the bones were piled, not scattered, a careful heap against the wall. Reuben felt cold spread through him. The bones were old, weathered but not ancient. Let's go, he said. His voice shook. Now. Mark stood slowly, unease flickering across his face despite the bravado. Fine, but tomorrow we're bringing torches. I want to see inside. Reuben didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the topmost window of the mill. For a moment, just a moment, he thought something pale had moved there like a face pressed against the glass. When he blinked, it was gone. The walk back to the cottage was tense. None of them spoke. The fog clung tighter, as though the valley itself was listening. Inside, the fire had gone out. The air was colder than before, damp clinging to their clothes and hair. They didn't relight it. Reuben sat at the table, staring at the dark window. "We need to be careful," he said at last. Mark rolled his eyes, pacing. "Careful of what?" "Stones falling on our heads. It's a ruin, not a monster." Emily hugged her knees on the floor again, her eyes shadowed. The bones weren't just lying there. Someone put them there. Mark stopped pacing, frowning. "Someone? Out here? Who?" No one answered. Night fell heavier than before. The fog thickened until the windows reflected only blankness. They sat in silence, listening, waiting. The sound came again. Thump. Pause. Thump. This time, slower. Closer. Emily pressed her hands over her ears, rocking slightly. Mark tried to joke again, but the words stuck in his throat. His bravado was draining, leaving something raw beneath. Reuben stood. His legs trembled, but he forced them steady. He walked to the window, leaned close to the glass. The valley was a gray void, but somewhere in that void, he swore he saw the faint outline of the wheel turning. Not smoothly, but in lurching, uneven motions, as though something vast pushed against it from below. Sleep was impossible. Each time Reuben closed his eyes, he saw the wheel, felt the weight of the mill pressing down on the valley. He dreamed of water thick with silt, of shapes moving beneath it, of faces pale and eyeless pressed against the glass. He woke with a start, heart hammering. The cottage was dark, the fire long dead. Mark's snores rattled from one corner. Emily lay curled under a blanket, twitching as if in fever. Reuben rose, every instinct telling him not to, yet unable to stop. He crossed the window. The fog had shifted. For the first time, he saw stars, dim and trembling above the valley. The mill stood clear in the starlight, hulking and black. And the wheel was turning. Slow, steady. Water gushed against it, though the stream was still. And in the upper window, something watched. Not a person, not a face he could name, but the impression of one, pale, stretched, unmoving. Reuben stumbled back, knocking into the table. The sound woke Emily, who sat up instantly, wide-eyed. "What is it?" she whispered. He shook his head, unable to speak. When he looked back, the fog had rolled in again. The mill was gone. Morning brought no comfort. Rain hammered the valley, flooding the stream until it frothed brown and violet. They stayed indoors, huddled near the reluctant fire. Mark tried again to talk about exploring, but his voice lacked force. Emily refused to look at him. Reuben barely moved at all. The day dragged, each hour heavy with silence. The cottage groaned, the wind keened through the cracks. Sometimes they thought they heard footsteps outside, but when they looked, nothing moved in the mist. By nightfall, all three were raw with unease. The thumping returned almost as soon as darkness fell. Louder now, closer. Reuben sat rigid at the table, every nerve screaming. Emily clutched her blanket, whispering half-formed prayers. Mark tried to keep still, but his hands shook. Then a new sound. Not the wheel, not the stream. A knock. At the door. 3 sharp raps, echoing through the stone walls. They froze. No one breathed. The knock came again. Chapter 3. The knock at the door. The sound didn't belong. That was what chilled them most. Not the fog, not the wheel, not even the bones. The knock was deliberate. Human. It was something imitating human. 3 sharp raps. Firm. Waiting. No one moved. The fire hissed low, shadows twitching across the stone walls. The rain outside had softened to a steady patter, but the knock cut through it, echoing inside their bones. Emily was the first to whisper. "Someone's out there." Mark swallowed hard. "No one's out there. Not at this hour. Not in this weather." Another knock. Louder. Reuben stood. His body moved before his mind caught up, legs carrying him stiffly toward the door. Every part of him screamed, not to, but something heavier pulled him forward. He stopped with his hand hovering above the latch. The silence pressed in. "Don't," Emily hissed. Reuben's hand shook. Slowly, he lowered it. "Who's there?" His voice cracked. No answer, just the creak of branches in the wind. Mark pushed himself up, trying for bravado, but landing somewhere closer to fear. If it's some farmer or poacher, they'll say something. If it's not, he trailed off, staring at the wood. The knock came again, this time only twice. Slow, heavy, Emily whimpered. Reuben stepped back from the door, breath shallow. The three of them huddled close to the hearth, waiting, listening. But no more sound came. The hours crawled. None of them slept. Every creak of the cottage, every gust of wind, set their nerves screaming. By dawn, they were hollow-eyed, too drained even to speak. The morning was no different from the night. The fog thick, the rain constant. The valley might have been an island adrift in some endless gray sea. Mark broke first. He slammed his mug down, spilling weak coffee across the table. "I can't do another night like that. None of us can," Emily said softly. Reuben stared at the window, at the shapeless mist. "We could leave." The silence that followed was sharp. Mark snorted. "Leave? We've been here 2 nights. You want to crawl back to York with our tails between our legs?" "It's not about pride," Reuben said. "Something's wrong here." "Of course something's wrong," Mark snapped. "It's a ruined mill in the middle of nowhere. It's supposed to be creepy. That doesn't mean it's haunted." Emily looked at Reuben. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale. "But you saw something. Last night, at the window." Reuben hesitated. His throat felt raw, words catching. "I don't know what I saw," but he did know. The image of that pale shape at the window was burned into him, as real as his own reflection. By midday, the storm had eased. Mark grew restless, pacing the cramped room like a caged animal. "We can't just sit here. I say we walk into the village, get proper supplies, maybe even talk to someone who actually knows this place." Reuben frowned. "There isn't a village nearby." "There must be," Mark insisted. "People used to work the mill, didn't they? Can't have been this isolated." Emily rubbed her temples. "If there's a village, it's not on the map." Mark pulled on his boots. "Then we'll make our own map. Anything's better than rotting in here, waiting for knocks at the door." Reuben wanted to argue, but something inside him cracked. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe they just needed to see normal people, normal houses, to pro.